Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to spend a little bit of time with our head coach and your head coach, Troy Ward. And Troy, really thank you. I want to thank you a lot for participating in our Leadership Summit. And we're looking for your insight because we need some help here with team. First of all, help me out. You've been around team all of your life. You've been coaching team for a large portion of your life. Look back a little bit. What were one of the great teams that you had, and how important was team to that success?
Well, Ryan, team was everything to that success, to be quite honest with you. I think we all, let's relate it to family. Husband and wife and children. Like, obviously, we all have a role in that family, and when we all do our role, whether it's the one parent disciplining or good cop, bad cop, whatever it may be, if we all do our role and we all participate, even our children participate in the family, then things run pretty smoothly. So places I've been along the way, I think I would tie team into it's been like a family. And I think that the togetherness from the time we get up in the morning until the time we put each other to bed, almost like the Waltons when they said goodnight on TV. Those are special times, and that's what the great teams I've been around have had, a family atmosphere.
What if you don't have that? Like, what, and that's really what our process is about today is, okay, so let's say you go to a team, you hit September, October, and oh my goodness, like it doesn't feel like a family. Then what?
Well, then you go back in and you've got to look at every individual part, and then you've got to basically go back to square one. And a lot of times being a great teacher or building a team is understanding where you left off doesn't mean where you pick up. Every year the team has to start over. So you have to take the new group of people that we're saying now is not working out as well as it should be, find your individual people of what they can and can't do, and then reconform the team. Most of those things, at least in hockey, in my business, all have to do with just human traits, human skills. Yep. So we go back to the basic, find out where they're at within those development areas, and then we have to build out from there, almost from scratch. And we cannot just assume that everybody who has joined the team has all had the same background in their upbringing. So most teams that I've been around that haven't been functionable right away usually are people issues. They're not related to actually playing the game themselves. They're how they get together as a collective group and how they interact, how they share. And one of the great things about great teams or about great leaders is the one trait that I find that's really, really important is humility. Humility separates the good from the bad right away. And you have to find that within your team. And there's certain players that or people that will have it on your team, and you have to make sure that you allow that to come out in them. And once that one or two people have that humility and they want to sit back and let the rest of the team just handle it, but they're guiding the ship, those are special times.
Very good. Other traits, Troy. So, you and I have been around a lot of great team players. Like, take us back into Pittsburgh with Jágr. Take us to other teams that you've been on. What are the great traits of a team player?
Well, Pittsburgh I'll speak to. Ronnie Francis is, I think, one of the all-time best players in the NHL. What Ronnie did was the same thing I just maybe spoke about in that last question was that he did a lot of underlying things in the locker room, in the weight room, in the shower, on the team meetings, on the team buses. Yep. And then he guided that whole thing. And then he just let the players just really take the leadership role, and Ronnie just sat in the back. Like he was just kind of like a really sly fox. He knew what to say and when to say it and which buttons to push at what particular times, Ryan. And then what he would do is he would just let those people feel that empowerment that he gave them, and he would sit back and just let that leadership go. That's tough dynamic in a lot of teams because a lot of people feel that the leadership always has to stand up and do everything by themselves. And quite frankly, the ones that have some humility to them and allow that just to take place, those guys are special. So Ronnie Francis was a guy that I was around in the late 90s that was a pretty special leader in a very, very big group. If I could throw names out like Hatcher, Jágr, Kovalev, Straka, Lang, Brasso, like these are special people that you would say, oh, they're all great leaders. Well, why did that team function so well? Because Ronnie gave them the direction but sat back and let those guys be the leaders.
That's really good. Troy, I had a chance to play a lot against Ronnie Francis. What a player, what a man, what a leader. You and I have talked about this many times. You and your coaching staff get together and you put together, you call them the veterans or you call them a special word, but basically it's a leadership team within the players. Talk to us about that function. How do you develop it? How do you use it? When is it effective?
Well, the leadership core that we put together here is we're going to eventually have our captains. We have not chosen those at this particular time as we sit here today on the 24th of October. We have not decided who those players are. But what we have is we've had a leadership core in place since day one. Those are people that we feel that have a balance to them, meaning they have a lot to give on the ice and a lot to give off the ice. And that's really critical when you go to form a leadership group is you have to have leadership qualities within the workplace and outside the workplace. And so that's what we've done with our leadership core. We meet once a week. This group determines how we travel, the days we have off, when we're eating our meals, when we're having our team meetings, and they really guide the ship. So as I go back in front of the team as the head coach, I basically always talk about the leadership core. The leadership core has decided this is how we're approaching our next trip. They live through it every day like you do. I give them some thoughts and suggestions, but the people actually going through the actual physical part of going through the process, they've help make the decision. So we meet like once a week usually to handle all different types of situations right now, both that are on the ice activities and how we're doing there and off the ice just as much.
Love that concept. So, Troy, a lot of the business people in our summit would say, okay, is that how Troy's engaging his team? Like, is that part of the process is to make it theirs and then that's engaging them? Or is it to influence the room?
It's just to give them a gauge, to be honest with you. And I want to give them a gauge and let them engage themselves into how they believe this whole thing should run. And then I'll sit back and listen to their suggestions. I'll take those suggestions that they have and I'll bring them to my coaches, which is Robbie Fatorik and Jordan Sigalet. We'll sit down and we'll say, this is what the leadership core decided to do last night in our meeting. How do you feel that will impact our team? Would you agree with this or not? Oftentimes, we usually always agree because they actually live the day-to-day. So we put all the ownership and all the leadership and all the power into those players.
Very good.
And then the team knows that the team is being guided by the internal parts. The coaches are just sit back and managing it, but the real decisions are being made by the people that are actually in there day-to-day in the trenches.
It's really good. A guy by the name of Dave King coached a long time in the NHL. He called your leadership, just a different name, the leadership team, he called them carriers. He said they pick up the message and carry it. And that's where you're going. You mentioned, Troy, about your captains. Now, what is your process to pick captains? I know that can be controversial.
Yeah, well, to take us back in history was a long time ago. It was 1983 and 84. I became the captain of my college hockey team. Both of those years I was named the captain, I was given that captaincy by my peers. My peers voted for my ability to lead them. So through my playing days, at least, I always felt the one award that I would ever take to my grave with me someday would be the fact that I was voted a leader by my peers. So I've always been a proponent of a guy that's coaching a team, and I let the players pick who the leaders are. So we're on that pace now, but one of the things that happens in the American League level is that players drop down from the NHL level at different times early in the year, as you know, as a former player and a coach. Like, they drop down a lot for the first month and a half. So I'm in no hurry to pick our leadership. I'm going to let that just work itself over time. It's kind of like finding your first girlfriend. Are you in a hurry to do that, or do you always just kind of just go through a process as a young man growing up? And we'll find, as we look back in our development stages, boy, it was a process. Like, I had some people along my way that I thought would be special in my life that maybe didn't turn out to be special. And I look at the captaincies the same way. Like, these players have to get to know each other, know how they function on and off the ice, what their decision-making process is, and then make a good decision to say, is this the leader I want for our team the rest of the year? So I just believe in letting the process take place, and then we'll look to close that off when we think it's right.
So what does that leader look like? If you haven't picked the person, what are you looking for from a quality point of view?
I think somebody with 2 words: balance, both on and off the ice, and consistency.
Okay.
Every day. They have to make sure they're consistent in what they do, both on and off the ice, and they have to have great balance, meaning they don't get too high and they don't get too low. They have some calmness. And I like for leaders to have a quality that they have the ability to understand body language and understand which players and people on our particular team are displaying something that is not probably of the nature we want. A lot of times people don't have to say anything anymore in our world. You just have to read their shoulders and you read their eyes. Yeah. And when you can see those things are off, then it's time for that guy with balance and consistency to say, I've got a teammate of mine that needs a little love. So this love will happen at a coffee shop. This love will happen somewhere else. But I have sensed it because I do have those attributes to me, and then I understand body language. And when you have those things, you'll find those people have special traits.
It's really good. Troy, let's get down to the word that we all love and we all hate: accountability. How do what when teams are on, and you've seen both sides, I've seen both sides. How do teams? I would imagine from a coaching standpoint, you want the room to be accountable to each other. How do you do that? How do you promote that? When does it work?
Well, accountability, Ryan, is you have. In our particular group right now, we have 25 different players, and all of them are different individuals. So accountability comes in different. The word stays the same. How you manage that with each individual is different. So every player is held accountable a different way. The team is held accountable pretty much in a consistent way. I'm a John Wooden type guy, meaning I believe in pyramids and building something. I don't like to lead a team in terms of accountability, of coming in and just arbitrarily shooting things off what's in my head, whether it be positive or negative, in front of the team. I believe that we have a standard and a code of accountability in our room, and that's through a pyramid that we've devised to make our team play well. What I do is I just go and I speak to the pyramid all the time. I don't really arbitrarily throw out thoughts that I thought were positive or negative, because then my emotions will always overrun my ability to teach. Teaching is transferring information. If you can transfer, you can teach. But there are a lot of people that know a lot of things that can't really transfer information. So my ability to transfer always wants to be the same. I will speak to our habits, which are both on and off the ice. I will speak to our hard. I will speak to our smart. And I will speak to our team play. And that's the accountability that I hold. The message is always the same. It's within the confines of a pyramid. But I never waver from that. And I'm consistently going over that whole process with them, and it's constant because it's the best teacher is repetition. So accountability for us comes through our pyramid.
So as a coach, do you, it's a bit of a weird question, but do you get close to your players, or do you sit back and not be their friend in case you have to deliver some bad news?
No, I'm very close. Okay. Very close. I like to be really close with the players. Like to know about their upbringing, their family, their ability to be a good student. Especially new millenniums today, you have to know a lot more about them. They're raised and how they're reared are a lot different. Some are one child, from a family. Some are LD in school. There's a lot of different things that are happening out there now. And so I like to be super close with my players, get to know them. And, we have family days where our married kids and their kids skate, and we try and do, as you know, you're great at this too, we always involve family. Like, I really want to know about the athlete and our particular team and know how they've gotten to be where they are and how they function. And it's always a tough day. The one thing I would say to the group is, like, when I deliver a message that's hard, it's just Troy Ward style, I do it through life. Yeah. I do not really do it through hockey. Yeah. Because I think one of the things that I was fortunate to have a coach as a father, and a really good mentor along the way, and he always defined honesty as 2 things: clarity and hope. Mm-hmm. And a lot of honesty out there in today's world, from managing standpoint or leader standpoint, is not always the word hope. Yeah. And so the closer I am with the athlete, the more I get to know what goes well and what doesn't go well with them. And it's really easy to give hope. But when you don't know somebody, you find yourself more sharp-tongued, more aggressive with them, and it becomes more negative. So I really like to go through it in a very tight manner and just really define honesty as clarity and hope.
It's really good. I like that. It gives me clarity. I like that one. Pat Quinn, my old boss, coach, and mentor, I once asked Pat, so Pat, what happens when coaches lose the room? You know, it's a hockey saying, isn't it, Troy? You know, the coach lost the room. And Pat was a great contrarian. And he said to me, coaches don't lose the room. Don't you love that? He said, but he had an interesting point. He said, players start listening to a new voice. Talk to us. No, this never happened to you, and I'm not projecting it on you. Right. But talk to us about what you've seen there from a leadership point of view when you're leading a team and it feels like somebody's lost the room. What does that mean to you?
Well, it means that probably the number one contributor to losing a room for me is you really your humility hasn't allowed you to let other people lead.
Very good.
You've really worn out your voice in the room, meaning you've always had to feel like you've had to be forefront as a leader, and I don't think coaches lose the room; their tone loses the room.
Okay.
Their consistency loses the room. You got to pick and choose your spots, and you got to know when you should go in and when you shouldn't go in. Okay. You got to let your assistants or your people that work in your front office do some of the heavy lifting for you. You need to sit back and trust them that they're going to run the process for you, so you know when to come in and when you know you need to step out. Tone loses you the room. I don't think a coach's knowledge or a general manager or a person that's in charge of a bank or a president loses the room. He's there too much or she's there too much, and their tone wears people out. Our relationships with our family or our spouses, it's not the fact that we don't love them. The tone gets old. Mm-hmm. The consistency and the hard gets old because it's not a different way to sell. Mm-hmm. So instead of being disappointed and coming home every night and just laying it on the kitchen table, there's another softer time to figure out what the tone is and what the right temperament is of the situation. And that's a trait that we oftentimes, I'll be this honest with you, it took me a long time, Ryan, and I tell this to everybody from the bottom of my heart, it took me a divorce to understand tone. It took me a divorce to understand consistency and timing. And it was like a doctorate's in life. And I miss my first wife, and I love her dearly to this day. But I learned a lot through that time, and it's helped me as a coach and as a general manager, as a leader, that there's a time and then there's not a time. And it oftentimes takes a failure to grow. Yeah. And that helped me the most.
Thank you, Troy, for that. I've often felt that life tends to give you the test first and the lesson later. It's sort of backwards, isn't it? But so let's get a little lighter here. Wins and losses. I know you place an interesting perspective in this area. Yes, there's a win and a loss at the end of the night. But what is success to your team? Like, how do you define success?
Process. It's just the process. We're going to have our good and bad days in professional sports and in this particular day with the Abbotsford Heat. But it's about the process, and it's about I have to balance. Number one criteria for me as it relates to the people listening is I have to develop hockey players. But that's from my general manager's email to me. From my email back is I have to develop good human beings. All right, that's my first process. But I have to make sure I develop good human beings so I set them up to be good people in life and good leaders amongst themselves as parents and within their spouses. That's first and foremost to me, but development is my number one criteria. I have to develop people, and you can only develop through a process. You can't base development on winning and losing. Winning certainly can help propel development for sure. But my secondary job and what I do here for the Abbotsford Heat is to win. But I must develop. And so development to me is just a process, and we go through it. We're going to have a game as early as tomorrow night here in this arena. And we're going to have some players that I'm really on right now today about video, about the process of developing this as one of their skill sets. Whether they score or not is immaterial to the team. But they have to develop, and this has to get better. So we just stay through it through a process.
It's really good. John Wooden said exactly that. You're a big Wooden fan. He said, "I don't worry too much about winning or losing." I love that quote. He said, "I worry a lot about practicing the details that give us the win." I love that concept. Two more right at the end here, Troy. So you've got a player that's sucking energy out of your team. What do you do?
Just it's a good old heart to heart. Players are not my business, as you know, suck it out in both performance and just in life skills. Like sometimes there's just have some people that are very negative and look at things a little differently than everybody else. But in general, you still have to go to the core of the issue. The core of the issue is the person. It's not the playing time. It's not the play in his game. It's the core of what's inside of him. We always operate on internal fuel versus external fuel. Internal fuel is something that just comes out of us, and it's our internal fuel. External fuel is a coach that has to motivate by saying certain things. That's not something that would ever propel anybody to be successful. People that have a passion are usually internally motivated.
Final question. Go back in your history. We started back in your history as a coach before at the beginning. Go back in your history. Pick a team that you were either coaching or a player on that went through a huge leadership/team crisis. A team crisis. How did it, just share that with us, and then how did you get out of it? And then maybe most importantly, what should have the team done differently?
Well, I'd have to say Pittsburgh in bankruptcy. We were there during the bankruptcy eras when Mario left the organization as a player and then became an owner. And we were going through the bankruptcy from the Baldwin era. And that was a very difficult time because it had affected the team in many different fronts. How we traveled, the money that was involved. Things were falling apart at the seams all the time. Yep. But I worked for a good man in Kevin Constantine, who was the coach, had some good leadership qualities. What he did, interesting, is he brought the whole group together, both from the ownership and team standpoint. We had a big powwow. We said, okay, how are we going to run this? Yes, we're going through a crisis financially, but yet at the same time, that doesn't mean that, like any family, is just going to break down. We're all going to fall apart and do our own thing. Yeah. Like, we have to stay together. So what happened during that process was everybody came together, both from he brought the whole front office right in with the team and brought the stick boys and everybody all in together, and we talked about the process, we talked about the positive conversation, we talked about what was going through all of us. It got aired out. There was some direction given from the team's perspective and the support issue and how we corrected it. Everyone went back, and we had a leader in the front office, we had a leader on the team as a general manager, we had a leader here, we had a leader there, and the leaders just stayed in contract, together on the whole thing, and we just fought through the whole process together. But it was a united group that all came together, and it was interesting because how many times have you been on a team where your office has come over to my office, and we've merged everybody together and said, we're at dire straits here. Yes. Like, we all got to be on the same page and speak the same language. That was how we went through it in Pittsburgh. It was really interesting.
Yeah, that's really good. Ladies and gentlemen, our head coach of the Abbotsford Heat, Troy G. Ward. Troy, a huge thanks, and you're going to hear a bunch of applause. You won't hear it right now, but people are applauding right now. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome, Ryan.